My name is Victoria, and I learned something important on my wedding day. Sometimes the person who tries to destroy your happiness hands you exactly what you need to destroy theirs. The morning started perfectly. October sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, the smell of white roses filling St. Mary's Chapel, my dress hanging like a cloud of silk and dreams. I'd planned every detail for 18 months. The music, the flowers, the exact shade of ivory for the bridesmaids' dresses. Everything was going to be perfect. Then Diane walked in. My soon-to-be mother-in-law stood in the church doorway wearing a floor-length white gown. Not cream, not champagne, not even ivory. Pure bridal white. Complete with a sweetheart neckline and a train that whispered against the marble floor as she walked down the aisle. The entire congregation turned. Whispers rippled through the pews like wind through wheat. My maid of honor, Jessica, grabbed my arm so hard I knew I'd have bruises later. "Is she wearing?" Jessica started. "Yes," I said quietly. "She is." My fiancé David appeared at my side, his face the color of old paper. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was planning this." I believed him. David was a good man, which is exactly why his mother had spent 2 years systematically trying to convince him I wasn't good enough. Too young, too ambitious, too independent. The kind of woman who would steal her precious son away. She'd tried everything. Surprise visits during our romantic dinners. Accidental encounters with David's ex-girlfriend at family gatherings. Even going so far as to book herself on our planned honeymoon cruise, claiming she'd forgotten we'd be there. But this was her masterpiece. "It's fine," I told David, smoothing his tie. "Let's just get married." The ceremony began. I walked down that aisle with my father, trying to focus on David's face instead of the white-clad figure sitting smugly in the front row. The pastor began the traditional words, the ones I'd dreamed of hearing since I was a little girl. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Everything was going according to plan until we reached the vows. David had just finished his, a beautiful speech about partnership and forever that made half the church dab their eyes with tissues. Then it was my turn. "David," I began, holding his hands, "from the moment I met you, I knew." "Excuse me." Diane's voice cut through the sacred silence like a buzzsaw. She stood up in the front pew, one hand on her stomach, the other waving dramatically in the air. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I simply can't contain my joy any longer." The church fell silent. Even the organist stopped mid-note. "I'm pregnant," she announced, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "David, you're going to be a big brother. Isn't that wonderful?" Gasps echoed through the sanctuary. David's face went from confusion to horror to something that looked like he wanted to disappear into the altar. The pastor stood frozen, mouth slightly open, clearly having never encountered this situation in seminary school. I felt every eye in the church on me, waiting to see if I would cry, scream, or run. Waiting for the bride to have a breakdown, to give Diane exactly what she wanted. Instead, I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a grimace disguised as politeness. A real, genuine smile that seemed to confuse everyone, especially Diane herself. "Congratulations, Diane," I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the church. "What wonderful timing you have." Then I turned back to David, took his hands again, and continued my vows as if nothing had happened. The pastor, bless him, recovered quickly and carried on. We exchanged rings, we kissed, we were pronounced husband and wife. As we walked back down the aisle, Diane tried to catch my eye. She looked less triumphant now, more puzzled. I think she'd expected tears, drama, a scene that would forever taint my wedding day in everyone's memory. What she got instead was grace under pressure, and it had thrown off her entire script. The reception continued at the country club. Diane held court at her table, regaling anyone who would listen with details about her pregnancy, her doctor appointments, her morning sickness. She was 47 years old and treating this like she'd invented childbirth. I danced with my husband. I cut the cake. I gave a speech thanking everyone for coming. Normal bride things, while inside, a plan crystallized with surgical precision. See, there's something Diane didn't know about me. My day job might be marketing coordinator at a small firm, but my real expertise is research. I'm the person companies call when they need to verify information, dig up backgrounds, find the truth buried in paperwork and digital trails. And I'd been researching Diane Parker for 2 solid years. During the cake cutting, I excused myself to the ladies' room. Instead, I slipped into the club's business office, where I'd arranged to store my overnight bag. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I'd hoped I'd never have to use. Dr. Martin Kepler, Diane's supposed fertility specialist. I dialed. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Dr. Kepler's office, this is Angela. Hi, Angela. This is Victoria Chin from MedVerify Insurance. I said, using the professional tone I'd perfected over years of making similar calls. I'm calling to verify a recent claim submission for a patient named Diane Parker. Date of birth March 15th, 1976. Let me check our records, Angela said. I could hear typing in the background. I'm sorry, but we don't have any patient by that name in our system. Are you certain? The claim is for fertility treatments and prenatal care over the past 3 months. I've checked twice. No Diane Parker has been seen by Dr. Kepler, and we don't provide fertility treatments. Dr. Kepler is an orthopedic surgeon. I thanked Angela and hung up. Then I made my second call to Dr. Sarah Williamson, the OBGYN whose business card I'd found in Diane's purse when she left it at David's apartment last month. Same result. No patient named Diane Parker. No pregnancy appointments. Nothing. My third call was to David's father, Robert, who'd moved to Arizona after their divorce 5 years ago. He picked up on the second ring. Victoria, how's the wedding going? Interesting, I said. Robert, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Has Diane been in contact with you recently? Specifically about any medical news? There was a long pause. She called last week. Said she was pregnant and needed money for medical expenses. I told her she was insane. She's been through menopause, Victoria. Has been for 3 years. I have the alimony medical records to prove it. The final piece clicked into place. Robert, would you be willing to send me those records? Tonight. Already scanning them, he said. David deserves to know what kind of person his mother really is. I walked back to the reception with those medical records in my email and a clear conscience about what I was going to do next. The rest of the evening played out like a dream. We danced, we laughed, we celebrated. Diane continued her performance, one hand constantly on her allegedly pregnant belly, accepting congratulations from confused relatives who didn't know what to make of her announcement. At 11 p.m., David and I said our goodbyes and headed to the bridal suite at the downtown hotel. As we settled in with champagne and wedding cake, I showed him everything I'd found. The medical records proving his mother had completed menopause 3 years ago. The phone call confirmations that she'd never seen any fertility doctors. Even a receipt I'd found showing she'd purchased a fake pregnancy test online. The kind they sell to women who want to prank their partners. David stared at the evidence for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were hard in a way I'd never seen before. She's been asking me for money, he said quietly. For baby expenses. I was going to surprise you by setting up a college fund for my new sibling. How much? I asked. 15,000 so far. I was planning to give her another 10 next week. We sat in silence, the magnitude of Diane's deception settling over us. This wasn't just about ruining our wedding day. She'd been planning to steal from her own son for months, using a fake pregnancy as her weapon. The next morning, David called his mother and asked her to meet us for brunch. We chose the restaurant carefully, upscale enough that she wouldn't want to make a scene, but public enough that she couldn't completely lose control. She arrived glowing, wearing a flowing dress that emphasized her supposedly pregnant silhouette. She'd even bought a baby-on-board pin that she'd attached to her purse. How are we feeling today? She asked, settling into her chair with exaggerated care. Morning sickness is really hitting me hard. David slid a manila envelope across the table. Open it. Diane's smile faltered slightly, but she opened the envelope. I watched her face as she processed what she was seeing. The medical records. The doctor confirmations. The online purchase receipts. I don't understand, she said weakly. You've been lying, David said. About all of it. The pregnancy, the doctors, everything. That's ridiculous. These are fake. She made them up because she's jealous of the attention I've been getting. I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made of Dr. Kepler's office, confirming they'd never heard of her. The color drained from Diane's face. You recorded private phone calls? That's illegal. Actually, it's not, I said calmly. I verified the recording laws in our state. One-party consent. And more importantly, fraud is illegal. Theft by deception is illegal. Filing false insurance claims is illegal. Insurance claims? David asked. I nodded. She submitted maternity claims to her insurance company. They're currently processing payments for prenatal vitamins, doctor visits, and pregnancy-related medications. Diane stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do, David said. Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your insurance company and withdraw those claims. You're going to return every penny I've given you for baby expenses. And you're going to get therapy. And if I don't, then we file charges. Insurance fraud is a felony, Mom. So is theft by deception. Diane looked between us, her face cycling through emotions like a broken traffic light. Anger, fear, defiance, desperation. You can't do this to me. I'm your mother. You wore white to my wedding and announced a fake pregnancy during my vows, David said. After 2 years of trying to sabotage my relationship. After lying to steal money from me. What exactly about that screams loving mother to you? She left without another word. Within 48 hours, she'd returned the money. Within a week, she'd withdrawn the insurance claims. Within 2 weeks, she'd moved back to her hometown in Ohio, claiming she needed family support during this difficult time. The story she told people there was that David had turned against her because of his manipulative wife. She painted herself as the victim, the loving mother cast aside by an ungrateful son. But the truth has a way of surfacing. Her sister found the medical records David had sent. Her best friend discovered the fake pregnancy test website in her browser history. One by one, the people in her life learned what she'd really done. The social consequences were swift and devastating. The bridge club dropped her. The church auxiliary asked her to step down. Even her hairdresser started booking her appointments at inconvenient times. 6 months later, we heard she'd gotten a job at a call center and was living in a studio apartment across town from her sister, who'd stopped taking her calls. David struggled with guilt for a while. She was still his mother, and he'd grown up believing family loyalty meant accepting whatever treatment they dished out. But I reminded him of something important. Real love doesn't require you to destroy yourself to make someone else happy. And real family doesn't sabotage the most important day of your life for attention. A year later, we found out Diane had started telling people she'd had a miscarriage. That the stress of her son's betrayal had caused her to lose the baby she'd never been carrying. Some stories have the villain learning their lesson and becoming a better person. This isn't one of those stories. But it is the story of how I learned that sometimes the best response to someone trying to destroy your happiness isn't tears or screaming or dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it's just patience, research, and one well-timed phone call. My wedding day didn't turn out the way I'd planned. It turned out better. Because instead of starting my marriage as a victim of Diane's manipulation, I started it as someone who'd stood up to a bully and won. And David, he learned something valuable too. That the woman he'd married was someone who would protect our family from anyone who tried to harm it. Even if that someone was wearing white and claiming to be carrying his sibling. The dress, by the way, I kept it. Not because I wanted a memento of her sabotage, but because every time I see it hanging in my closet, I remember that I handled the worst thing she could throw at me with grace. And that phone call, it only took 5 minutes to make, but the confidence it gave me has lasted a lifetime. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just the truth, delivered at exactly the right moment, to exactly the right people.